In this episode, I'm joined by a cultural historian and an award-winning author, Bob Batchelor. We're going to be exploring the Gatsby Code, his fascinating look at why the Great Gatsby continues to fascinate audiences and still holds power 100 years after its publication. So together we're going to discuss Jay Gatsby as far more than a literary character. Because Gatsby may be a mirror of America itself, our hunger for reinvention, our fascination with wealth and spectacle, our complicated belief in the American dream, and illusions we all often chase in the name of becoming someone new. So, from jazz era excess, from class and longing to modern influencer culture, we're going to be revealing why Gatsby still matters and why Fitzgerald's masterpiece continues to feel so hauntingly current. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was a very kind introduction and a lot of great topics to explore. So it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. Okay, 100 years ago, The Great Gatsby came out. There are a few books that have stood the test of time, but frankly, not many. I mean, we think of those as the classics in ways. What do you think it is about Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby?
Well, I've traced the history of this book so many times. I could go into pretty finite detail, but I'll give you the bigger picture.
Yeah.
One of the things that made Gatsby so great and the novel so great is that it was short. And in the 1960s, during the baby boom, whenever colleges exploded in terms of the number of people going to colleges, classes went from 8 to 10 to 30 or 40 in a classroom. English professors needed something to assign that students could get through in the course of a semester. So that's one of the reasons why Gatsby became great after World War II. That's kind of a interesting but slightly odd rationale. I think the real reason why The Great Gatsby is great and has remained so important for 100 years is the beauty of Fitzgerald's writing combined with the ambiguity of Jay Gatsby as a character. So on one hand, you have this lyric kind of beautiful, almost poetry in a novella length, but the things that are actually said about this main character are hidden. And that transparency, that almost shadowy figure of Jay Gatsby allows us to put a lot of our own thoughts and ideas on him. So he's constantly morphing and changing. And that's really the story of America, constantly morphing and changing.
It's interesting you say that because I interview a lot of writers and songwriters, musicians, and they say they rarely clarify lyrics or how people interpret things because everyone can read something and take away their own meaning from it, which is why I've studied perception for over 30 years. Because I'm always fascinated that two people can read the exact same thing and they'll say, well, when he said this and meant, I'm like, whoa, that's another way to look at it. So you say that, so you're telling us there's a lot of that in The Great Gatsby.
Yeah. If you look at Jay Gatsby as an individual, and that's the reason I wrote the Gatsby Code. I wrote a book that came out in, I think it was around 2013, 2015, called Gatsby. It was a cultural history of the book. So I treated the book like it was a person and wrote the book's biography, the roller coaster ride that Gatsby took as a novel. And so a couple years ago, there is a biography conference. It's really a speaker series. It's the best in the country as far as I'm concerned. It's called the Great Lives Program. It comes out of the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia. They get Pulitzer Prize winners and big New York Times bestsellers. They asked me to speak about Gatsby the next year. I went the first year, spoke about Stan Lee. They said, we want to have you back. Will you speak about Gatsby? So rather than just create a PowerPoint or a presentation about Gatsby, I decided I'm going to write a book about Jay Gatsby as if he were a person. So the Gatsby Code is looking more at Gatsby as a person. How would we look at this person if he were alive? And so it's an amazing lifespan, both of the book and then of this character who is a incredibly complex human being. And again, that speaks to all of us. Nobody's sitting around thinking, well, I'm not very complex. I don't have much going on. You ask somebody, hey, what's going on? They're like, oh my goodness, shake their head. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm so da da da. I mean, it's just like the state of America today. And we can keep pulling from Gatsby as we think through our own lives, as we think through our own reinvention and think through our, kind of constantly changing ideas about ourselves. So, I mean, it's just fascinating, and it's got a cast of characters who you can love and hate, who you can feel sorry for, who you can criticize. It's like maybe it's like a great soap opera, like the best soap opera ever. But you could read it in an afternoon, and then all the movies. So there's another reason why Gatsby is great, because every era we've seen a new movie come out. I mean, you've got to stop me, Diane. I could go on forever. So
Because it is such a fascinating topic that, something becomes timeless. You could talk about the Bible. The Bible, has a certain timelessness to it. People have been reading it for, 2,500 whatever years. But there are a few, Pride and Prejudice. It took place in a time and place, but still people, gravitate to some of the messaging of it. And then you've got books like The Great Gatsby, where you say, it's like, what is it? Like, what are those intangibles that a personality has in their character that make people connect?
yeah, the intangibles is a great word, really, because I have studied the 1920s and the early 20th century so much. I did another book called The Bourbon King. It's about this little known gangster named George Remus, who
Mhm.
was actually the biggest gangster in America in the earliest days of Prohibition. And allegedly, Fitzgerald had partially modeled Jay Gatsby off George Remus. And so this guy's story is, I can't even, people think that I made it up. They think it's fiction, but it's not. He ends up cornering the market on liquor in the United States. He's a thief and a scoundrel. He hires an army to protect his goods. He goes to jail. It's like bribery up through the Harding administration and attorney general. He ends up killing his wife in cold blood outside of Cincinnati, defends himself, creates a plea of basically what's like temporary insanity, and gets off, and then goes off into the world again. It's a crazy story. So the complexity, and so the intangible piece of this, what I found in both studying Gatsby, studying George Remus, is that people love the Jazz Age. You remember, after the Leonardo DiCaprio version, for 2 or 3, maybe right up until COVID, you couldn't go through a summer without somebody talking about a Gatsby party, a Gatsby wedding. Everything was Gatsby. Clothing, the whole mid-century kind of art deco came back into style, all of this. So it's amazing that people love the Jazz Age, but they hate Prohibition. So it's this dichotomy, and it's all about these intangibles, and it's culture. That's why I tell people I'm a cultural historian, because I like to see a thing and pull at all the threads. what's going on in the broader culture, what's happening in music, television, film, what in music, the whole thing. So Gatsby, it has all that as well. So,
What,
but
what,
intangibles is a good word.
what do you think the tie-in is? Jazz and prohibition. I think because there's a part of us that, whether we are or aren't, all want to be a little bit of that rebel. We want to be the person that knows there's rules, but we're going to break the rules, even if we don't, or even if we only like push the needle a little. I mean, if you think
Hmm.
about an icon or what we've thought is cool over the years, you know, yes, cool is always being a good, nice person. That'll always be cool. But if you look at iconic images, it's the smoker. It's the guy, somebody with their James Dean with his sleeve rolled up, Steve McQueen in his, on his motorcycle or in his, Cobra, or whatever. It's always something that's kind of edgy.
Hmm.
Where
Yeah,
do you
and
think that ties into it?
I
The
think that you're
prohibition,
onto
getting
something.
away with it.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely that, and that's a great point. So jazz, truly American music that comes up out of the African American scene in the South, and the things that were going on there up the Mississippi through Chicago over to New York. Um, but then you also have in The Great Gatsby itself, you have like the beginning of celebrity culture. Fitzgerald lists a long list of these old money and new money, Broadway directors, producers, actors and actresses, dancers. Jordan is a professional level golfer who's been on the cover of magazines. So he's almost like a director in a film showing us what to um, focus on, what really matters here. And so what matters is watching the rich, watching celebrities, aspiring to the rich, gossiping about celebrities and wealthy, and trying to live vicariously through those who are living allegedly this larger than life image. And so Fitzgerald is critiquing something that was big then, big in 1920s. You have Babe Ruth, you have all the jazz, all the actors in film and radio, but who could have known 100 years ago that was going to be the biggest? I mean, celebrity culture is the biggest thing in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the epicenter.
That's very interesting. And you had all the big magnets, whether it was trains or oil exploration, where, you know, building the libraries, building infrastructure, building homes that became libraries. That's a very interesting point. I don't think I ever tied that together with the Great Gatsby. And if you look at modern culture now, what drives social media? The same
Hmm.
kind of things. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Celebrity
cool
culture
information.
is, yeah, it's really at the center of the novel. And see, Diane, most people aren't bonkers like me, and they haven't. I've read. I stopped counting after I read The Great Gatsby 147 times. And at that point, I'm not, there are parts where I can almost just recite. And I've watched all the films multiple times. I've listened to the book on tape from probably 10 different narrators. So this is what happens when you become a little bit bonkers and a little bit obsessive about a novel. Um, you start to figure out all these little threads that connect to other times and our times, and so for
See,
better or worse.
I can relate to that because I was moving things around in my room, in my bedroom, and I looked over at my um, stack of books next to my bed. I've got stacks of books everywhere. I'm a book buyer. I grew up in a house you weren't allowed to watch TV, but my mother would let you get any book. She'd take us to yard sales and say, you can take as many books as you want. Because we were little kids, they'd usually let us just take the books, take them, get them out of here. But I had three copies of Atlas Shrugged next to my bed. I have The small version that's this big that I gave up on because okay, I'm too old. I can't even read the words anymore. And I have two, the hard copy and the soft cover of the big reader version that I could probably hurt someone badly if I dropped it on their foot. But it's the characters, it's the storytelling. I'm just like, and I know people don't want to hear about, On Ron, but I mean, the story's great. It's a great story. And it's timeless to me. I look at it then and I look at it now and I'm like, oh, I could read that again and I'm going to pick up 10 new things. And I think I've read it 6 or 7 times.
Yeah,
So I
it's
understand that.
you can't see it because it's just below where I am, but I have an entire shelf this size and books stacked on the side that are all related to Fitzgerald. Because what also, a lot of people don't know this, so hopefully your viewers and listeners, this will be something new for them as well. But F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda, his wife, they were some of the biggest celebrities in the world in the 1920s. They were like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie when they were together. They were that level of celebrity. And they were globe trotting around and everybody knew them. They were on the cover of magazines. So they were famous as well. So their lives are super interesting. And they were also incredibly complex people. A long list of challenges in their lives. Fitzgerald didn't necessarily have that great of a life early. Didn't come from the wealth. So he's able to infuse some of the ideas for his own life into the novel, and it just makes it all that much more interesting.
They say that fiction books are often autobiographical. And, because you're creating characters, and what are you creating characters on? What your perceptions of life, your beliefs, your thoughts, how you've processed things. And yeah, you can, tweak it. You can go into maybe your crazy side. You didn't really want anybody to see and create that character, or that wild side, or the conservative side, or whatever. It's really in many ways a self-exploration when you're writing a fiction book.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that primarily, so I'm not a writer who, I don't privilege fiction or nonfiction more. I, in my life, have gravitated more to nonfiction, but my PhD is in English literature. I've had to read hundreds of novels, and so, and I have my first novel coming out in September. It's a political thriller, and it's called Are You a Patriot? And it's hopefully it's going to do well and it's going to find its readership. But one of my mentors, a writer who is super important to me and has had so much consequence on me, is Jerome Charon. And he's probably the most famous writer in America that most people have never heard of. He's super famous overseas.
Sharon? Have
Yes,
you ever met him? Okay, because I was going to say, I can introduce you.
No, definitely. And I think his wife, Lenore, is how you and I first met. So, and I love Lenore, and Jerome has written a couple endorsements. He wrote the foreword for the Gatsby Code. He's a mentor to me, even though we don't talk frequently, we email a lot. He says about fiction that basically all the books are about me. And so most fiction writers aren't that willing to come out and say it, but it's pretty true. I just wrote an article about John Updike, or for my podcast, I was talking about Rabbit Run, and a new book of John Updike's letters came out last year. And in one of the letters, he's talking to his lover who becomes his second wife, and basically admits, if you want to know how sad I was in my first marriage and restless, it's all in the books. And so Updike, when he was alive, never really admitted to writing autobiographical fiction, but his letters, which come out, 20 years after he dies, or 15 years after he dies, prove that point out. So that's a great point. And Fitzgerald definitely put different parts of his own life into The Great Gatsby, and he was a great watcher of the wealthy because he ran around in circles that were above his own status in terms of his economic well-being. He wasn't super wealthy like lots of the people in The Great Gatsby, but he ran in those circles. So he understood the wealthy and wrote about them from that perspective.
That's so interesting what you said about books and um, Updike talking about the letters and being autobiographical, because when I have lots of books and people will come over and they'll see my bookshelves and they'll look and they'll say, oh, they'll take one down maybe while I'm cooking something or doing something. And then they'll say, can I borrow this? I'm like, no. Because I've highlighted, folded, and, put post-it notes. None of my books are unmarked. None of them. I'm like, that's a little too personal. So I just book.
Yep.
So it's a really funny thing. And when I would say I could never write a fiction book. And I think I probably couldn't write it because I know it would all be such self-exposure. And I think I'm pretty self-exposed anyway. So it's an interesting, now your Patriot book, let's talk about that, because just the word Patriot is explosive today.
Yeah, and we just released the cover on July 4th. And so I'll send you a copy of the cover so that you can put it with the notes and whatnot and people can see it. I co-wrote this with my creative partner, Donald Thompson. And the idea is the log line, because Hollywood and LA are so big on log lines. The book is essentially a black James Bond like character meets House of Cards. So if your listeners and viewers are into fiction by Brad Thor, Mark Graney, John le Carré, it's in that vein. But I loved House of Cards. I mean, we all, yeah. Nobody likes the revelations about Kevin Spacey quite literally because of some of the things that were going on that we didn't know about. But you can't deny that it's a great show.
And he's phenomenal in it.
Yeah, and 24. So there are a bunch of influences. I've been reading thrillers for 30 years. It's kind of my brain candy. And so Don and I came up with this idea about what's the central question of modern America. We all face it, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Are you a patriot? And what does patriotism mean? And so we took this character and purposely black lead character, because there are not enough black characters leading these kind of stories, and put him into situations in which he'd have to question his patriotism and what it means to be a patriot. And so we think that the book, it's not one of those ripped from the headlines. It's not like a CSI television episode, but it helps us understand what's important and the kind of things that are on people's mind in today's world, especially considering the divisiveness of the political parties and the algorithms and all those things. So yeah, I think Are You a Patriot is going to be well received. We have some early readers who have loved it. We have over 21,000 followers on a Facebook page dedicated to the novel. So we're building a street team, and we have high hopes that this is the first in the series, and then we're going to continue. The main character's name is Xander Hale, and we're just going to proceed, and hopefully, 20 books from now, I'll be back on your shows and we can talk about how important Xander has become.
We don't have to go 20 bucks. I mean, when that book comes out, we can book again because I think that's such a fascinating topic. And I always find it interesting when you talk to authors who've created a character and like you got James Patterson with Alex Cross or
Hmm.
Nora, what's it, Roberts writing as J.D. Robb, or the LeCar books, where somebody creates a character and Ludlum, where the character keeps going. And then you have other
Yeah.
people that create these great characters and you never hear from them again. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I think we all, James Bond, we all want to create the next James Bond. And, you know, I, I,
Well,
I
that's a whole
I
other topic.
watched,
I wanted to
yeah,
leave James Bond as James Bond.
yeah,
I think
I
he
watched all the
belonged in.
James Bond, but, I reread, uh, uh, I just recently read one of the novels, and of course it's escaping me which one. And the book itself was phenomenal, and it was much better than the movie. I mean, we all say that and laugh about it, but even though the James Bond movies are good, the novels are so fantastic. And we're shopping "Are You a Patriot" right now. It's tough to try to sell the a president. Our president is named President Rollins in the book, and it's tough because people don't want to get political or see the presidency as overly political right now. But we'll see what happens. Um, we're interested in building the readership and launching the series, and it's a lot of fun. The book is essentially done. We're about 99.8% done. We'll start sending out advanced reader copies in the very near future, and then it'll be out in September. So we're pretty excited.
That is very exciting, and I could see you've either got a potential for a movie series or the next Netflix or Amazon or whatever series. I mean, there's
Yeah.
opportunity there. And people like to build on things that were successful. There was West Wing, there was House of Cards, and patriotism is a big question right now, especially as we're in our 250th anniversary as a country. It's fascinating timing.
Yeah, and Xander Hale is a character who has come from he's kind of the great American success story, and he's able to achieve a lot of his dreams and become a business kind of titan. And now that I think about it, this conversation is kind of spurred in my mind. There are probably aspects of Jay Gatsby in Xander Hale because probably everything I write has. I just, you're going to think I'm a bonkers again, Diane, because my next book after Patriot is also already completed. And it's a biography of the great pitcher Nolan Ryan. I don't know if you're a baseball fan or not, but
I know Nolan Ryan. Yeah.
yeah. So he's going to be 80 next year. And so I thought perfect time to kind of reintroduce his full, because younger people, they only see him or know him from the fight that he had with Robin Ventura, which people see on YouTube. And I wanted the people to get the full story because there's this great American success story. He had this amazing love affair with his high school sweetheart. They're still married to this day. He's turning 80. But now that I think of it, like I'm drawn to people who pull themselves up from little or from a place and get to a better place. And we all see that in Jay Gatsby. Once you find out the backstory of Gatsby, it's it's he is a version of the American dream, and that was even before the American dream was ever labeled a thing, and he has always been. So in researching the first book, I run across all these really odd things. The idea of the American dream changes over time. So in the 80s, there were journalists who called our current president a Gatsby-like figure. When if you've read the great if for people who've read the Great Gatsby, they're nothing alike. He was given hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on who you listen to, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to launch his career. That's not at all what happened in The Great Gatsby. So people started to equate opulence, riches, wealth, success with the American dream and Gatsby, even though those ideas are kind of tangled up. So it's another way to use The Great Gatsby to think about what it means to be, a person in this country, what the American dream means. And so when I think about what impact The Great Gatsby's had on me, it basically influences everything else that I've written. I look at Nolan Ryan's career and life as a Gatsby-esque American dream. There are aspects of it in the Are You a Patriot thriller. So it's the novel. I mean, I can't tell you how much consequence it's had on my thinking and the way that I view the world.
I love it. I'm telling you, these interviews go way too fast. These conversations, they're over before I know it. Everybody, I'm Diane Brissell. This is the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast, and I've been talking with Bob Batchelor, whose last name, that's just a cool last name. Bob Batchelor. And he is the author of the Gatsby Code. He's the author of quite a few books. So I highly recommend you check out the links below, because they're going to be links to find out all about Bob, what he's writing about, what he has written about, because he's prolific and there's more to come. So, you're going to want to follow him. So thank you, Bob, for joining me. Don't go anywhere, Bob. We're moving over to the green room. Everybody, hit subscribe and follow all the links to follow Bob. See you next time. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.